Hey, what is going on, everybody? Bauer Brown here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. The video that I have for you guys today, I'm going to be showing you how to do stuff. That's right, all kinds of stuff. Actually, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going over a script tool. Again, another script that we can use within Giants Editor, and it is called Easy Fence. Okay. And this is a way for us to put fences together very rapidly. It comes in extremely handy if you're trying to cover a large area, or if you're trying to, deal with some kind of elevation changes or anything along those lines. And as we run this script and I give you an example, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about and just how wonderful this script actually is. All right. So I know that we already have a way to run fences like using the spline placement script, right? So, but using that method, even after you place the fence, there's usually a fair amount of tweaking that needs to be done afterwards, where you need to adjust either a rotation of the fence or you have to tilt it one way or the other. You get the idea. All right. So what this script does is it totally eliminates that and it runs it exactly the way that we want to. Okay. There's no tweaking involved. When it's done, it's done. It's that easy, folks. Right. So you can't go wrong with this. And like I said, it's called Easy Fence. All right. So there's a couple things that we're going to need here to get this thing to run. The first thing you're going to need is some sort of fence object. So what we're looking at right now is a fence that I created inside of Blender, and that's to use with my new map, which will be released no time soon. It is coming along very slowly, but it is coming along very detailed, very nice. It's just a little bit of a slower pace. As you can tell, things have been going slow for me right now. Just from the rate at which I've been releasing videos, you can tell has been pretty slow. All right, but anyhow, all that aside, you're going to need a fence that we can get this to work with. All right, once you download the script, you will see from the title of the script itself that this also works with utility pole wires. All right, so and it works with much more than just that, right? So you have to get creative with this and use your imagination, but you can get it to you can use this for uh so many different things. All right. So what I have here, like I said, is a fence that I created. You're going to need something along these lines, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be like something with a wire like you see here. Maybe it's a fence with like some kind of wooden panel or something like that. That may work as well. And I'll explain that to you when we get to that point of the tutorial of how to set that up to get that to work. All right. But for the sake of this tutorial, or just this fence itself, when I created this fence, I also created a separate wire, which I have here. Okay. So I created this separate wire because I knew that I would be running it through this script at some point. It just works better with one wire, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. So like I said, you're going to need something that you can run. And then the other thing that you're going to need is the script itself. So if you head over to my website, if you're over here at bauerbrown.com, if you go to downloads, go down to scripts. At the very bottom here, you can see we have Easy Fence, and just above that, we have the spline placement version 1.3. All right, now as far as the spline placement, it doesn't matter what version you're using. Okay, version 1.2, 1.1, any version will work. You could be using the Farmer Boys version, that's just fine, or any spline placement script will work. All right, so it doesn't matter. I just happen to be using this one for this tutorial. All right, so get both of these downloaded. They do come in a zipped format. All right, so you're going to have to unzip them before you install them in the Giants editor. You'll be installing them via whatever method you are most comfortable with. You should be very familiar with how to install scripts at this point. All right, so keep in mind that with my website, with bauerbrown.com, you do need to be registered and logged in to be able to download, and that just keeps out all the riffraff, all the scammers and spammers. And I don't think you really fit into that category, but it still keeps them out. Okay. All right. So once you got that installed and ready to go, there's a few things that we need to do here. Okay. Number one, you need to keep in mind that when you are running any type of object through the spline placement script, okay, it's going to run in the direction of that blue arrow. All right. So if you look at my wire right now, if I was to run that through the script, it would show up this way because it's going to run in the direction of the blue arrow. So I'd be putting, objects, side by side by side, which is not what I want. All right. So that needs to get fixed. Okay. And the way that we do that is what you want to do is right now I highlighted this wire because I want that to run in this direction. So you're going to move that to where that blue arrow was, you know, prior to you moving it. All right. So the blue arrow used to be there. and I'm moving my fence so it points in the direction of that blue arrow. So that would be a negative 90 degrees that I'm moving that, like so. Okay. And then from there, you want to go up to, you want to go to edit, go to freeze transformations, and just make sure just rotate is clicked, and then click apply. Okay. And you can see what happened there. Now my blue arrow is right here in the direction that I want that wire to run. All right. And my barbed wire fence looks like that, that's set up okay. The post is okay. All right. So I got that taken care of. Now there's a couple things that you need to keep in mind here. Or actually one important thing, if the fence that you're using right now, so say this fence that I have right here, this barbed wire fence, if I had used that somewhere else in this map, right? So like up here in this little city-ish thing I have here. All right. I have a deco farm somewhere up here. Let's see if we can find it really quickly up down in here. Okay. Here is that barbed wire fence. Okay. So I had already used that. If I had taken a copy of this, one like an existing fence, and I would have adjusted my transformations on that, even though it's a copy of it, it will affect every other version of that fence on my map. So don't make that mistake. I've done that in the past where I didn't realize that's what was happening. And I made, I adjusted transformations, and it adjusted every single instance that I had, and it was just a nightmare. All right. So let's not do that. If that happens to be the case, what you want to do is export this, as its own object, and then make any kind of changes that you're going to need to, like change the material or something like that, or maybe give it a different name, a different ID, and then re-import it as a separate object. Okay. And then you can go ahead and, adjust your transformations and stuff like that and not affect the other fences that you have. So like I said, it's just very important to remember that if you're using a copy of an existing fence, that you could affect all the rest of them by, adjusting your transformations. That really shouldn't be a problem, especially if the fence that you have, you had downloaded from somewhere, right? So it's probably set up correctly. This one like I said, I made it inside a Blender, and it's just an adjustment I needed to make. It was an oversight on my behalf. So I need to go into Blender at some point and fix that. But it is possible that you will come across that the object you're trying to place does not run in the direction of the blue arrow, and you need to fix it. Okay, the other thing that you need to keep in mind when placing objects via the spline placement script is the scale of the object. All right. Now, like, again, if you downloaded it from somewhere or somebody else created it, chances are that your scale is probably 1, 1, and 1, just like it should be. But for any reason, if you had to like stretch it or adjust the scale in any way to get that to work, or to look good, when you run that through the placement script, it's going to reset that to 1, 1, and 1, and it's just not going to look right again. All right. So your scale, it does need to be 1, 1, and 1. All right. Now, if you need to, you could do the same thing that we just did with the rotation, and you can freeze transform. So if you go up to edit, you go up to freeze transformations, you can see you have one for scale. All right. So what you would do is you would adjust the fence to exactly the way you want it. And then instead of rotate, you would put it on scale and hit apply. And then there you go. Everything looks good. So just keep that in mind. If your scale is not at 1, 1, and 1, when you run it through the spline placement script, it's going to reset that to 1, and it may not look right for you. All right. So now that we got all the warnings out of the way of what could potentially go wrong. All right. We'll jump right into this. Now I'm going to break this video up into 2 parts. The first part is going to be us working with a fence. And the second part, we're going to do utility poles. All right. So utility wires are a little bit different, or at least in my case, the way that I needed to run them, it was very different. So that's why I'm going to do this separately, because this is going to take us a few minutes to go over this. Okay. And so there's a few things that we're going to need here. Like I said, for one, I am not going to be running this double set of wires. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to take this wire and I'm going to move it inside of my post. All right. So that's now, do I want to put it right in there? Actually, I'm going to control Z. What I did there is, instead of using my middle mouse button to drag it in there, I'm going to control X to cut it. And then I'm going to paste it right inside of there. And that did not show up again. Jeez, get it together, Bauer. All right, let's control Z a couple times. There we go. I think what I need to do is adjust attributes for that. and we're going to put our translation at 000. There we go. Now I'm going to Control X and Control V. There we go. Showed up just the way I wanted it to. That's one thing to keep in mind. I do this all the time, right? So I'm so used to moving objects around using my middle mouse button. And the difference there is when you use the middle mouse button and you drag and drop that way, your translate X, Y, and Z values, it keeps them exactly what they used to be. All right. So when you take this wire, it's got kind of like a global translation value. And if you use the middle mouse button and drop it into post, it becomes a child of that post. And its translation value should change. But when you use the middle mouse button, it does not. All right. So when you control and, in a Control X, when you cut and paste, that redoes the translation values and it becomes a child of the post. And you'll see, you should pretty much be aware of that by now if you've been following along with my tutorials. All right. So we got these kind of ready to go. There's a couple things we're going to need to do here first. All right. The first thing being, you can see that I have this post. It's inside its own transform group called barbed wire fence. We don't want that, not for the sake of this, this script. All right. The script doesn't really like that when you have that inside. It needs to be just the post, and the wires need to be a direct child of the post itself. Right. So the post you don't want to have in any other transform group. You want that to be all by itself. And in the wires, you want to be a child of the post. All right. So for the sake of the script, first thing we're going to need is we're going to need the length of this wire. All right. And for most things that you download, it's very easy, especially with fences, because they usually label them accordingly. 2 meter, 4 meter, 6 meter, 8 meter fence. You get the idea. This one I created inside a Blender. And I did it in feet, didn't do it in metric. And I believe, what did I do? Somewhere between 8 and 10 feet, maybe. So it's probably going to come out to roughly 3 meters, somewhere ish in that area. But I will show you how to do this. So what you want to do is you want to create a transform group. And this is if you don't know how long it is, right? And you're going to Control X, you're going to cut, and you're going to paste that right inside of the wire itself, whatever object you're trying to measure. All right. So there's my transform right there. This gizmo right here is my transform. And all you want to do is just move that down to the other side of the wire, like so. Okay, zoom in. We'll get that, fairly close. And we're at 3.056 is what we have. Okay. So let's go up to our scripter window. We'll go up to the script editor. And actually, I already ran this once before. So yeah, it's 3.056 is the length of my wire. There's a couple things that you're going to need to put in here eventually. And I'll show you just this area right here are the only ones that you're going to have to do anything with this script. These are the only numbers that you're going to have to adjust. Super easy. I'll show you what needs to go there. All right. So the first thing for the wire nodes count, that's how many wires we're going to be putting on this pole. In our case, it's 2. All right. If you're using a double wire, like I started with, then you would be using 1. All right. I recommend going with 2 if you can. It just seems to be easier that way. All right. And right here, the wire length, that's the number that we had just got right here, this translate number. That's the length of the wire itself, obviously. And you don't need that transform anymore. You can actually go ahead and delete that once you've got that measurement. Now the fence wire, the number that it wants for that, it doesn't necessarily need to be, let's see, what do I want to get at? It doesn't necessarily need to be the wire the wire does not need to be a part of the post. So let's try this. Let's put this outside of here because I'm eventually going to delete this wire. That's why I'm moving this. All right. So I'm going to use this right here. This wire here, it could be a part of an existing fence. It doesn't matter where this wire is, where you get this from. Okay. Like I said, it does not need to be a child of this post. And the reason for that is it's going to clone it. It's going to make a copy of that wire. And then it's going to use the copy. Okay. So it's just going to duplicate it. It doesn't matter if it's part of an existing fence or what have you. Okay. So it really does not matter where that wire is at. Now I'm going to be deleting the wire that's inside of this post. So that's why I made a copy and I moved it outside of there. Okay. So what it wants from there is I'm going to take that wire and I'm going to tell it to copy this wire here. And I'm just going to get the ID. I'm going to get the node ID. I'm going to Control C to copy, get back inside of my editor here, and I'm going to put that down underneath right here for my fence wire. Control V. We'll put that inside of there. Fence transform, that's going to come into play in a minute when I show you what we're doing here. The second thing we want to do, all right, is we're going to set up these wires and we're going to tell it where on this post we want these wires to be. Now, this isn't something that we type directly into the script. We're just going to set it up and it'll know what to do from there. So I'm going to duplicate this wire, right? So I have 2 wires. Now, each one of these wires, I'm going to hit Control G and I'm going to put them inside of their own group because I don't want the wire itself. I want just the group, and it'll make sense in a minute why. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this first one and I'm going to move it up, on that fence where I want it to be. And like I said, I want it to be right there around where that little black wire holder is. Okay. So I'm going to move that there. Now I'm moving the whole transform group, not just the wire. Okay. So that's very important. The only thing that wire is there for right now is like a visual reference. Okay. And then we're going to move that up. And why do I have a third wire? Oh, that's that wire there. Okay. It doesn't matter. That can go anywhere at this point. That can actually go underground. All right. So like I said, you move just a transform group. So you can delete the wires that are inside of there because that was just for a visual reference. So if you click on a transform group, you can see it's exactly where it needs to be. Okay. And that's saying that's where those wires need to go. All right, so we're ready to go with that. So the second thing we need to do is start prepping our spline placement script. So if we go up to scripts, and I'm going to go to spline placement, create. Oops, I needed to create a transform group. I probably just made that inside my photo layer. I did. Good job, Bauer. Let's not do that anymore. Let's go up to create transform group. Then we can go to scripts and we can go to spline placement, create. Okay, like so. For placed objects, or objects to placed, we're going to use this post here. So I can Control X. Actually, I could have just duplicated. It doesn't matter. Object to place. I'm going to put that whole post inside of there with both transform groups. Okay. And I need a spline. So let's go up to create a spline. There we go. And that I'm going to put under spline placement, drag that in there. Alrighty. Now we can get our spline laid out. Now, for the sake of this tutorial, I am going to run a spline in a way where I normally would not, right? Something that's going to be a little bit of a nightmare under normal circumstances to try and run. So let's back this up a little bit here. Control B. And there we go. All right. So under normal circumstances, I would never, ever run a fence this way. That just looks like a nightmare to try and do. No, thank you. All right. But like I said, this is going to demonstrate just how easy this makes this, right? And it's going to be perfect when it's done. Trust me, it will. I would not lie to you. All right. So let's go up to window. We're going to go up to script editor again because we want to actually, it's already open. We want to make some adjustments here for the spline placement execute. Let's save my changes. Now I already have this set up to 3.05. And the reason I'm keeping this distance the same as my wire. Okay. If you look at this, what happens here is when this runs, we're using the spline placement, the version 1.3 only to set the posts. Okay. We're using Easy Fence to put in the wires. Now, if you can set your posts at any length that you want, 3 meters, 9 meters, 12 meters, 136 meters. It doesn't matter, right? You can put them at any distance that you want. But what you need to keep in mind is that the wire that you're putting in between them, right? So right now I'm at 3.056 for the length of my wire, or roughly 3 meters. All right. If I put my posts further than 3 meters apart, it's going to scale that wire accordingly. It's going to stretch it, right? And right now I have some detail work done to my wire, and it's going to warp that and make it look really bad if I put it any further than the actual length of the wire, right? Does that make sense to you guys? That it's going to start scaling that wire to further apart you are. So I'm going to try and place my objects exactly or as close to the distance of the wire itself. So, right. So I got 3.05. Let's see. No objects at start. I'm going to keep it true. Stay upright. I'm going to keep at true because I don't want my post leaning, as it goes along. Sometimes, it helps it look a little more realistic. Uh, but it makes things kind of, you don't really want to do that. Or it's up to you. Actually, maybe you do. But in my case, I'm going to keep mine true. All right. Everything else is false until I get down to the bottom. Align with terrain. I'm going to want to be true. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. All righty. So let's close out of there. Make sure spline placement is highlighted. All of our objects are ready to go. I'm going to go to scripts. So I'm going to go to execute. Okay. And there's all of our posts. And man, that's a lot of posts. All right. So now we need to get back into, I should have kept that window open. We need to get back into the script editor. All right. And I'm going to go back down to the easy fence. Okay. Now the fence transform is the next thing, the next number that we need to put in here. Okay. Now we can use for placed objects, right? Underneath that spline placement, we'll just use that entire transform group. Okay. Because that's where our fence is. Basically, all these posts are underneath this placed object. So that's the fence that it wants, right? The transform group that contains all of your posts. Now you don't have to use the spline placement tool to put down your posts. You can do this by hand, right? You can control D or control B or however you want to do it, interactive placement mode. You can place them by hand if you want to. It's not a big deal. And for a shorter area, smaller area, that may work out okay. Kind of defeats the purpose if you're making a massive fence that goes halfway across your map. You probably don't want to do that by hand. But I just, I want to let you guys know that you don't have to use the script. Okay, you can place them by hand. It's not a big deal. All right, but wherever your fence happens to be, whatever transform group is holding that fence, that's the ID that we want here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy, Control C that ID, and I'm going to put it down here underneath fence transform. All right, now the maximum number of posts in the start post, that's more for, we're going to use the maximum number, but the start post, I'll explain what I mean. That's if you want to break this fence down. Say it's a really, really massive fence. We're only going to use 100 posts, or what I have here is 120. We'll use that as an example. All right. So the maximum number of posts, we're going to go down to the last post in the list. All right. And I'm going to look at what I have here, this index path. It has 154 posts there. Okay. So that's what I'm going to put in for this number, 154. I mean, it could be 155, 156 maximum. Doesn't really matter. It needs to be at least as many posts as you have. All right. And then a start post, like I said, this is if you want to break it down into smaller chunks. You don't have to run the entire fence in one chunk, right? So maybe the first one, the maximum number of posts, if we have 120 posts, maybe we only want to run 60. All right. So the max post, we'll put in 60. We'll run the script. All right. And then the second time you do it, the maximum number of posts, again, would probably be another 60 because we're running 120 posts. And then the starting post is going to be 61, right? So then that will run 61 through 120. Does that make sense to you guys? I generally don't have to. I've tried it just to see how it works, and it works fine. But I generally don't have to break my fence down into smaller chunks, but you could if you wanted to. And it comes in handy if for some reason, like maybe you're changing posts, you're using a different post for one section than you are for another section. That comes in really handy for something like that. Just so long as you know what it does and why it's there, you'll find the correct use for it when it comes up. Okay. But other than that, those are all the variables. Those are all the information that we need to plug into our script, and we should be ready to go. All right. So we can save that and close it. Okay. And like I said, make sure that when you run this, all right, your post is all by itself. It doesn't sit in another transform group like I had originally. I had originally had a transform group called barbed wire fence, and my post sat inside of there. All right. You don't want that. That post needs to be by itself, and both of your wire nodes need to be a child of that post. Okay. So once you got that done, you can just go ahead and you can run the utility pool wire script, the easy fence script. And there you go. How nice is that? I mean, look at it. This whole entire thing. There is no tweaking that needs to be done at all. Right? Those wires are exactly where I want them. They're lined up perfectly. They're lined up perfectly with this hook here, right? That black hook. Right? And this for elevation changes and everything. It's going to keep those wires nuts on, man, exactly where you want them. I mean, look at it going through curves and everything. It takes the curve splendidly, right? Even up here. I mean, this is a crazy curve, right? And it handles it gracefully with no issues whatsoever. All right. So the guy did an awesome job. This is just it's an excellent script. It's not very complicated script, but nobody's done it before him or since. So it's been really good. Speaking of scripts, let's go back up there and have another quick look just so we can tip our hat to this gentleman here. Let's go to where was I going? Window. Oh, script editor. Alrighty. So the guy that wrote this script here, and I'm not going to try and do his, I'm going to butcher his. I'll leave it up to you guys to butcher his name. I'll give it one shot. Model liker, maybe. Something along those lines. But anyhow, thank you to this guy. An outstanding script. I've been using it since FS19. It's been a joy to use. It's been a really good, really good script. But anyhow, just below that, you will see there are two addresses here. If I did not mention this earlier, those are tutorials. There's an English version and a German version. They're YouTube tutorials on how to use this script. All right. So if you're tired of hearing my voice, or you're deciding that maybe I'm just not doing a good enough job explaining this thing to you, you can definitely go over and check out the two videos that he has here, depending on which language you speak. And after all, that's how I learned how to use the script. I had to watch his video. So, it's definitely doable. But I just wanted to put that out there, right? That he does have some videos that you can watch. So you always have a backup. If there's something you missed in my video or you can't figure something out, maybe he does a better job of explaining it. So again, hats off to this guy. We thank you very much for the script. This has been a wonderful utility. It's saved me so much time in the long run, and it's going to save you a lot of time. All right. So that's it in a nutshell, right? I'm going to wrap this up because I don't want this video to drag on and on and on. This is going to be a 2-part series, right? The next part is going to show you how to do the utility wires, because it's a bit of a different process, right? And very quickly, I'll show you what I mean here. If you look at, here's one of my utility poles, you can see how many child objects are inside of here. All right. And it just, the way that this script works, it's looking for one parent, and the child's, the children of that parent are what it considers to be the wire nodes. All right. So something needs to get broken down inside its the utility pole, right? You can't just use it the way it is. You can run, I'll explain all this to you. All right. So when we get up to doing the utility poles, I'll explain it all. And it's going to be different because maybe you're not running the same type of utility pole that I am. All right. So hopefully once we go over this, it starts making a lot more sense as far as what the script is looking for and how you need to break objects down to be able to run them through this tool. But for now, right now, like I said, that should have been, a pretty good explanation of how to use the fence maker, or easy fence, I should say. And, you can see it just fantastic, right? So when you run this over large areas, you got an absolutely perfect fence. Perfect. No tweaking whatsoever. And I can't tell you the amount of time that I've spent tweaking fences and guardrails and you name it, man, just trying to get things to lay just so. And even though I still, I have this, this script, this utility at my disposal, I still do things the hard way. Generally, I do it that way if it's like a smaller area that I'm working on and it just doesn't make sense to run a whole spline and everything else, just run them by hand. But you know how tedious that it can be, and you could see how much time this is going to save you in the long run, right? So hopefully, like I said, you guys found this video beneficial in some way, shape, or form, and you guys are going to put this information to good use. And if that happens to be the case, definitely leave a like, a thumbs up, that sort of thing. That's really going to help me out in the long run. And we're going to leave it at that. With that being said, I am Bauer Brown, and I will see you on the next one.